There are a number of key questions that travellers like you and me should be asking about cruising and vaccines, and it's not the one that most of us are asking right now. I'm Gary Bembridge, and I'm going to explore what you should actually be asking yourself, your travel agent, and the cruise lines about vaccines and cruising, especially if you have existing bookings or are thinking of making a future cruise booking. I also have the answers to many of them to share, so let's begin. If you're asking, will the cruise lines require passengers to be vaccinated before they can travel with them, you're focusing on the wrong thing. The much more important question to ask is, will I need to be vaccinated before I can go cruising? And the answer to that is more than likely, as many countries and ports of call are going to require it. And this, in my view, is going to drive what most cruise lines are going to have to do on vaccines. So for example, in big news, the European Union has now agreed on the introduction of a digital vaccination passport by this summer, and that's going to allow free travel within all of the EU, initially by their own residents, and then for non-EU travellers to enter Europe. So if you want to cruise to any country that's in Europe as this rolls out, the lines will have to insist you have proof of vaccination to meet that rule. Another example is Royal Caribbean, who've been allowed to start sailing their new Odyssey of the Seas from May out of Israel, calling on Greece and Cyprus if they were carrying only vaccinated crew and passengers. Now, those three countries, they've agreed for residents who have proof of vaccination to be able to travel without restrictions on arrival between each of them. All passengers over the age of 16 have to be vaccinated, and this was the country requirement, not one the line put in place themselves. The countries required it. Will Caribbean islands also require this? It seems very likely, because many of them currently have a combination of testing and quarantining for travellers arriving there. Of course, that's impossible for cruise passengers. The only way for cruise passengers to be able to get off the ship to explore freely on their day while they're there would be with some kind of vaccination passport to get around all of that. So if countries on cruise itineraries require proof of vaccination, then the cruise lines will have to insist on all guests having it too. So why do I say that? Well, currently, if a country that a cruise is calling on has an entry visa requirement, everyone on the ship, even those who are not planning to get off in a particular port, have to have a visa. And the cruise line has to check that everybody on the ship has a visa, because the lines cannot enter a country unless everybody has a visa. So they won't embark anybody without a visa, or they just won't be able to go to those particular countries. So the same seems inevitable if vaccine proof is required by a country. The cruise lines are going to have to ask for everyone to show proof of vaccinations. The other trigger, of course, may be that authorities like, say, the CDC in the United States or the equivalent in the UK, in Australia, and all those other countries, if they make that part of the return to cruise protocols, that of course would be another trigger. So if you are planning a cruise, watch what the countries you're calling on are going to require for you to enter, not just the cruise lines. So the example of Europe, they're moving before the cruise lines. What if you want to travel with children under the age of 16 where no vaccine has yet been authorized for use by kids? So the lines that are already requiring vaccines, irrespective of the itinerary, so that's things like Crystal, Saga Cruises, American Steamboat, and Victory, they are either adult-only lines, or they mostly have an over 60s passenger mix. So they have all qualified kind of early for vaccines. So that's not really a key issue for them. So first off, though, you cannot take any under 16s with you on those lines that I've just mentioned, because all of their vaccine policies do not allow anyone who cannot be vaccinated for any reason, that includes medical or age or pregnancy or whatever. Anyone who chooses not to be vaccinated for any reason, or has not yet been vaccinated due to the pace of the rollout in their country or region, they don't allow any of those people on, so you certainly can't travel with kids in that case. Secondly, in theory, you need to wait to see what rules are put in place domestically, and then of course by countries that will require or do require proof of vaccination for entry, to know whether you can cruise with children until of course they can be vaccinated. However, it seems basically unthinkable that children under the age of 16 are going to be excluded from traveling internationally until they can be vaccinated, because of course that could be a very long time off. So while Of course, we may have to wait to know for sure. I think we can assume there is going to be some form of accommodation, some form of rule for those under 16s to be able to travel and by definition cruise, whether the line make the rules or the places they call on actually make the rules. Of course, some people do not want to or cannot be vaccinated. So can you cancel and actually get a refund if you're one of those people? Now, based on what the lines that have introduced the vaccine policy to date, the answer is very simple. It's yes. All of those lines have offered passengers, the ability to cancel and get a full cash refund if they don't want to get vaccinated for any reason, or they cannot be vaccinated in time for their cruise for whatever reason, or they cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons, for pregnancy reasons, or if one of their travel party falls into any of those categories. So it's a very simple, yes, you can get a refund. So I think, therefore, that we should assume that this will also happen across the board if and when vaccine policies are introduced for whatever reason they are brought in. I've been asked by some travellers and quite a lot of crew members in countries that are receiving Russia's Sputnik, China's Sinovac, BioNTech, and India's Bharat Biotech vaccines, if those will be accepted. Now, this is a really, really good question, absolutely for sure. And it's one that we're going to have to keep on asking, especially if you're receiving one of those vaccines. Cruise lines who've introduced the vaccine policy so far, they've defined what vaccines they will accept. So, for example, Crystal Cruises, they only accept those that are approved by the European Union or by the United States FDA, so that's the Food and Drug Administration. So that at the moment includes like the Pfizer, BioNTech vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, and the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, and others to come like the Johnson & Johnson one. Now, if you reside in the United States and the EU, then it basically seems pretty safe to assume that whatever vaccine you have is going to be on the list, no matter whether the lines require them or the countries require them. So if you do receive one of those in your country from that list, you are likely to be covered and shouldn't have to worry. Now, as many of the countries where crew are based are using some of the other vaccines, this is a big unanswered question, as it is for passengers, say, in Brazil that I know are getting different vaccines. It's one we don't have the full answer to yet, so one to keep asking and checking on whether your vaccine will be accepted. Will you still be subject to the other protocols being put in place for cruising as it resumes? Things like wearing a mask, social distancing, and all those other kind of rules that are being put in place? Yes, again, is the answer. All the lines that have introduced the vaccine policy have added it to their existing protocols. It basically adds to the various layers of protection that are being put in place on cruise ships. Now, this, of course, is first of all because there's no full data yet on if and the extent the vaccines stop you from catching and spreading the virus. The data is around stopping people getting seriously ill and dying from the virus, but of course there's more data coming around spread, which may change things. And secondly, and very importantly, the protocols have been agreed with the relevant health authorities, and so they're going to remain in place basically until they are mutually agreed to be adjusted or modified, which I actually suspect is going to be pretty slow to happen because everyone is really going to want to be really cautious about lifting those kind of restrictions for cruising. At present, there are differing positions on if both crew and passengers will be vaccinated. So there is no clear answer on this one, though there are some pretty clear directions. On the one hand, Saga are going to insist that guests have a requirement to be vaccinated before the crew can. Now, that's due to timing of when they think crew can be vaccinated. So what they're doing is they're putting in place other measures like extra testing for the crew, while others are going to insist that both passengers and crew are vaccinated. The big groups like Norwegian and Royal Caribbean, they're saying that crew will be, even if passengers are not required. However, it seems to me that there's going to end up being some kind of consistency across both crew and passengers. It just makes sense, whichever way it goes. And I think the answer to this more clearly will emerge as we see whether the lines lead setting the vaccine requirements or they follow the rules from the authorities and countries which may have a much more blanket requirement. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, I have hundreds of other episodes that are packed full of cruising updates, advice and tips. So why not go and enjoy another one right now?